Welcome to Santa Barbara Talks with Josh Molina. It's my pleasure today to be here with Santa Barbara City Councilwoman and newly appointed member of the California Coastal Commission, Meagan Harmon. How are you today, Meagan?
Thank you. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me, Josh. I guess it's been like a little over a year since I've been on the show and just watching what you've been doing in our community. It's such an honor to be back. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it because a little more than about a year ago, actually,
I think it was,
right? We did the podcast. You're SBT podcast #1. And I remember you're like, okay, Josh, fine. I'll talk to you, whatever. We'll try it. And we had a great conversation. So now here we are, we're back, and a lot has changed. So thank you for the opportunity to talk to you in this platform and this environment. Let's dive right in and talk about the news of the moment. You were recently appointed by the governor to the California Coastal Commission, and that's a really significant deal, significant for you, but significant for the region to have a representative from Santa Barbara to really, obviously you have a role of being an advocate throughout the state for the coast. However, having somebody from Santa Barbara is a big deal. So can you talk a little bit about what this moment means to you and, how were you able to do it?
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, I have to say it was pretty surreal. I mean, I was kind of like, my husband, when I got the call, my husband was like, "Are you so excited?" And I was like, I don't know what I'm feeling. I was like, I think I'm tired, maybe, I don't know what this feeling is. But it is a huge honor. I think as I've sort of had a couple of days to let it sink in, I'm just realizing how humbling it is, honestly. It's a huge responsibility, obviously for the whole state, but I really feel like the role for me as a Santa Barbara City Council member to be able to represent our regional interests on this body and really advocate for us and bring our values to this body is pretty exciting. I take that really seriously, and that's what my intention has always been, were I lucky enough to be appointed. So I'm feeling kind of the weight of it right now, to be honest. And there's a lot of reading to do. So I'm like, whoa, it's going to be a super steep learning curve. But I'm really thrilled. I couldn't be more excited and pumped to also kind of bring folks in here in Santa Barbara. I think one of the things for me that I learned really quickly on the Santa Barbara City Council is that the Coastal Commission is kind of a black box, and we don't really know what happens. We don't know how to deal with it. And I strongly believe it doesn't have to be that way. And it starts with our regional representative, making sure that everyone knows what's happening, when it's happening, and how to advocate for the things that our community wants and needs. So that's my #1 goal.
And part of that, of course, is you're on the city council, so you have to represent the city of Santa Barbara on issues that sometimes are adversarial to the Coastal Commission. Vacation rentals, one of them, most recently in the news.
I've heard that come up.
How do you balance that? I presume that came up during the interview process of where are you going to land when maybe the city's got an issue with the Coastal Commission on development? I mean, how do you balance those two roles?
Yeah, that's going to be a challenge. And to be honest, I'm not sure. I think that's one of those things I'm going to have to feel my way through. But when that did come up, and it did, here's how I answered it. And this is how I would want to approach those issues is, there's so much opportunity on Coastal Commission with the Coastal Commission body to try to deal with these thorny issues before they get to the point of Coastal Commission has to do an up or down vote. And that's an area where the representative to that body can actually make a huge difference by saying, hey, I see this coming down the pipeline. We're going to have to navigate this. Let's get connected with Coastal Commission staff. Let's look at the Coastal Act. Let's figure out where we have room to maneuver together. And I from what I hear from Coastal Commission staff, and I'm just getting introduced to them now, it's all super new. They love that. They don't want to be in an adversarial position. They really want to try to sort of change the dynamic and say, we're here to partner with you. And yeah, we've got some stuff that we have to do. The law is the law, and my job as a coastal commissioner is going to be to uphold the law. But let's not get to that point where it's, the Coastal Commission is undermining the city. And I don't think we have to get there. And I think everyone's really feeling that there's a lot of potential in this moment. And frankly, the Coastal Commission and the coastal municipalities are going to have to work together. There are huge challenges coming forward, sea level rise being primary among them. Yeah. And there's just no way that coastal can come in and impose solutions, or cities can undermine the purpose of the Coastal Act. We've got to work together, and that's the only way forward.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a step back from the news of the appointment and let's talk about you. And so let me create a little bit of the narrative here, and you're free to jump in and add to it or take away. But there is a lot of buzz around you, and there has been a lot of buzz around you since you were appointed. As we know, there was talk of the appointment. There was a feeling among the insiders that a certain person was the shoe-in, okay? And then you interviewed and you blew everybody away. Everybody was very impressed. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, maybe it's going to be more complicated than that when it comes to appointment time. And you got appointed. And ever since that day, everybody sort of like, Meagan Harmon this, Meagan Harmon that, right? And there was so much energy and excitement around you, when you were appointed. And I should say, so many high expectations that you were going to be the one who was going to come in and you were going to rescue downtown. You were going to be the bridge toward, the business community and, the slow growth community or the Democratic Party. You were going to be kind of everything to everybody. And I think that there's obviously when you start out with that kind of fanfare and that sort of interest and curiosity, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to be judging you quickly and right away. And you've got a lot of things about you, of course, that are easy to point to. You're young and you're a woman and you're in politics and you're obviously very ambitious. You're not there to coast, right? You talk about the issues on the agenda. So coming into all of that and carrying all of that weight, can you talk about what it's like to be Meagan Harmon, knowing that you have so many supporters, but you also have, quite honestly, a lot of people who are like, see, I told you, she's not who she said she was, poking at you. Maybe it's just a bit of a whisper here and there, but it is out there. What is that like to be you, and how do you reconcile all those perspectives and expectations of you?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question. As you're saying it, I'm like, gosh, how do I manage this? Well, I think there's a couple things. I knew coming in, it was very much how you described. I think it was such a surprise even to me to get appointed. And obviously I believed in what I was bringing, or I wouldn't have put my name out there. I don't mean to imply that I thought I, was never gonna get it or anything, but it was, I thought an opportunity to meet people and have my ideas sort of in the public sphere, and that was my goal. And so I knew coming into this role, being someone so new, that people were going to write onto me their own desires, ideas. It's also, frankly, and I have to take some responsibility for this, it is 100% my personality to be in a meeting and say, I understand where you're coming from. Thank you for sharing. That's just kind of how I do things. That's how I gather information. And I think it's really easy for folks to hear that, and their takeaway is, she's right there with me, So I've been trying to work on that, actually, just being a little bit more clear when I'm in those meetings. But yeah, I knew that expectations were going to be super high, in large part due to the fact that nobody knew me. And so it's fun and it's exciting and it's thrilling. And I think, people think maybe this is someone who's going to align with my values in all ways. And I hate disappointing people, or I hate when people don't like me. I want to be liked. But at the end of the day, I've just had to really come to accept that my purpose here is to do what I believe is right for our community. That's it. And there is no way to please everyone. The important thing is continuing to talk to everyone, continuing to hear them, and to not discount any perspectives. And I believe that that is how I approach this job. That's how I'll continue to approach this job. But it's been hard. I mean, I can't deny I don't love hearing those whispers. It's hard because this is a local job, like I really see this as community service, and it's about loving this city and wanting the best for it. And so when I hear that, it's, I'm like, oh, I saw you at the grocery store yesterday, man. You know what I mean? It's like, we're friendly, even if we don't sort of see that getting to the end result. We all want the same things. We just have different ways of getting there. And so it can be hard, but I just kind of have to keep my focus on doing what I think is right for our community, and taking it all in and gathering information, and then just trying to make the best decisions for my neighbors that I can. But I guess all that's to say, I think that was kind of inevitable. Folks didn't know anything about me when I came in. So it's kind of a perfect storm of, maybe she feels this way, or maybe we can be allies in XYZ. And frankly, I didn't have tons, a thought out policy position on every issue that was going to come before council. So a lot of this, I've developed in this seat. I've developed my perspective on these issues as I've been learning about them and deciding them. So I really value what I've heard from everybody, whether they, love me or hate me, like my decisions, don't like my decisions. It's helped me to craft my perspective, and I really value that.
Let's talk about the word ambition, okay? Because we do hear that, and I'm a reporter, so obviously people say all sorts of things to me, on the record, off the record, and they should, right? I'm not going to out anybody who says anything, but the reporters hear things, right? And so one of the things you hear about is she's smart, she's talented, and she wants to get out of Santa Barbara and go somewhere else. And then, you're running or you get appointed to the Coastal Commission. And obviously, that helps you with sort of a larger platform in terms of presence, throughout the state. Let's talk about ambition. I mean, do you take offense to that? Is it fair to say that you would, yes, like to seek a different office outside of Santa Barbara at some point because you're 34, 35, 34.
Don't age me.
Is it fair to say, yes, she's ambitious, deal with it? Let's talk about that. Are you ambitious, in a hurry? You're going to be here and you're going to be somewhere else in a few years and you're going to go as far as you can go. Is Santa Barbara your community for life?
Okay, I feel like this is a can of worms you are going to regret having opened. Just kidding. I have spent so much time thinking about this. And before, because I hear it a ton too. Mm-hmm. I hear it constantly. And I guess before I sort of answer that question, I have to acknowledge just a couple things. And the first is that I'm really super sensitive to this criticism. Like, it really hits me in a way. I'm trying to develop a thicker skin around this. I'm really trying to, but it's really difficult for me to take on. And maybe saying criticism isn't the right word. This observation, though I don't think people are like, she's ambitious, love to see it. Like, typically that's not how it's framed. So I think it's important to just say that from the outset. I'm particularly sensitive about this. And then secondly, I have chosen to believe that 9 out of 10 times when someone says, oh, she's really ambitious, the intent behind that is not rooted in misogyny. I believe that the intent is about something else. And a lot of folks say to me, look, we said Doss was ambitious. We said Greg was super ambitious. It's not about gender or sex. And my feeling, or sort of my response, is like, I totally believe that y'all said that about Doss and Greg too, but it hits me differently. Like, I am a woman, and so I receive that word differently. And I don't think that we can deny that it's a word that's sort of on this continuum of language that's been used to temper female ambition our whole lives. Like, I hear that word and I immediately hear, calling girls in grade school bossy, telling them they're talkative, calling them chatterboxes, rightly or wrongly, and again, I don't believe that's the intent behind that word. I think, there's other things driving it, but I can't help but receive that way. You know, I walk through this world as a woman, so that word has particular connotations for me. And I don't think it's like ahistorical to say that that's still super relevant in our society. I mean, 2019 Democratic primaries, people were calling Kamala Harris super ambitious, and I don't think they meant it as a compliment, you know? And so I struggle, like when you call a man ambitious, worst case scenario, you mean he's kind of a striver. But what you hear is go-getter. The subtext is leader, somebody who leans in, who's super passionate. And when you call a woman ambitious, we can't help but hear a subtext that's cold, calculating, inauthentic. And I've begun to feel that that's kind of a narrative that's developing about me that I don't even recognize that. That's not how, I mean, maybe that's how I come across, and my job is to fix that, you know, and to make sure people see me and my heart. But yeah, so I struggle with that word. And I guess in answer to your question, I'm never going to apologize for being driven. I'm a driven woman. I'm raising my daughter to be a driven woman. But what drives me is not at root self-interest. You know, what drives me is a passion for being part of building a better world for our neighbors. And I think, you know, the people that know me know that. And my job, I guess, as a politician, I can say now, is to try to communicate that with all our neighbors. And if they don't see that, you know, to give them a chance to get to know me so that they can trust that that's the root of my drive, rather than something else more nefarious. But yeah, obviously that word's a trigger.
Yeah, I don't know if you've seen Emma Watson's speech at the United Nations that she gave maybe 5-6 years ago now.
Yeah, back in the day.
Yeah, and she talks about the bully thing, right? You know, like or not the bossy thing. She talks about how, you know, being told from a very young age you're bossy and how that sticks with women. And you know, I think that in your case, there's a lot of misogyny, and there's a lot of ageism, and it's probably more so, at least from an outsider's perspective, or at least that, you know, there's some ageism. How do you navigate that when you're dealing with a lot of people, you know, who are older, and you're looking at men who are sort of in these systems, in the leadership? You know, if you're looking at the city of Santa Barbara, and you're looking at the administrative department heads, you know, how do you deal with just that age gap? I mean, I would imagine that you would just have a lot of older people sort of trying to mentor you, or like tell you, oh, I'll tell you how it is, or you'll come along well. Yeah. And how do you know the difference between thank you, that's great, versus I'm fine, I don't need that?
Well, it's funny you bring that up, because I was thinking about our last conversation on Santa Barbara Talks, and I think, and I should have gone back to listen to what I said about this, but I think I made a big deal about how difficult the age thing was, and how that was really a struggle for me. And it's funny because I feel like I've aged 100 years in the last year, you know, so now I'm like, I feel so old. It's like, I don't, you know what I mean? But I have really tried to reframe those conversations for myself, not as conversations that negate or undermine or belittle what I bring to the table, but as an opportunity to gain perspective that I don't have. And I don't do it well every conversation. You know, I mean, there are some conversations I can't get there. But one thing I have learned, especially over the last year, is that I just, you know, I don't know it all. I definitely don't know it all about the city of Santa Barbara. You know, there are plenty of people who have a context and a history and a perspective that I need to be able to make better decisions for my neighbors. So it's hard, you know, I don't love it. I do sometimes feel like I'm shouting into the void, and people just kind of like, oh, you know, good luck, kid, you know. But for the most part, you know, as these 2 years have worn on, I do feel that I've earned a measure of respect from folks that maybe were a little more skeptical in the beginning, whether or not they like me. You know, I think respect is different from support, is different from agree with. But as I've proven, I hope proven myself to be more effective on the dais, I think those conversations have become a little bit easier. At the very least, folks, I think now recognize that I'm at least going to have some influence, and so they should probably try to influence me. And that's been really helpful, honestly, because I feel like some of the disparity in experience and power and age and gender, like as I've proven that I am engaged and I am focused on this and I'm not going to back down on the issues, we've sort of reached a little bit more of a balance point.
Yeah,
so that's good.
It's interesting because before your time, the city council was not paid. It was sort of like a stipend, and a little bit even, you know, before you. And a lot of the activists said, hey, we need to start paying people because we need to get young people on the council, because it had often been older retired people who were serving. And obviously they have a great perspective and they've been in the town, and that's valuable. But there wasn't that working family perspective on the council. And so the voters passed it, you know, let's pay the council members. And of course, it's not much, but it is something, you know, it does allow people to work. And many of them still have other jobs on the side because they need to, because it's Santa Barbara. But it's sort of like, this is what you asked for, Santa Barbara. I mean, you wanted young professionals to be able to serve. And
they're like, we regret it.
Exactly. You know, and then there was more progress with the district election. So, you know, now we're paying you, and now let's try to equalize some of the representation throughout town. So these are all things where, you know, Santa Barbara's wanted this, and I think it's more of like a human psychological thing of like, we always want people to do well. And then once they really do well, we're like, wait, you know, and
not too well.
Not too well, not better than me, you know, and that's a thing, you know, it's like, I always tell people who get into, you know, like students, or it's like this student this or this student that, and they start sort of hating. It's like, imagine if that were your sister or your brother, or if that were your mom or imagine if you like loved that person. Like, how happy would you be that that person's being successful? So just let it go, you know, just let them do their thing. It's hard to be successful in anything. So we should support people when they get there. And so I just think it's interesting that that's sort of the dynamic of, well, we've got the young working professional family person on the council. Let's talk a little bit about your balance of being a mom and you know, being a partner. You've got you know, you're married and you're on the council, you're a full-time attorney. Your daughter Mara is she 3? Is that
she's gonna be 4 next month?
Okay, wow. So that's, I mean, the first 3 years are gnarly. The worst. They're the hardest, you know, in my experience. They are so hard. And after that, they you know, it's just like exponentially they start being able to be more independent. How are you doing that? I'm tired. I don't want to be like, oh, Meagan Harmon, what, like, but it's hard. It is hard to be a parent and work and be on the council. Can you talk a little about that balance and how you do it?
Well, thank you. Because it actually, frankly, it really feels good to have another parent just say parenting is hard. You know, I mean, I love being a mom is the absolute best thing that I have ever done by far. But to hear someone who I know loves his kids, who's an amazing dad, say parenting is super hard, it's just like, thank you, you know? And I struggle with the balance. It is a constant everyday negotiation. And there are days when I feel like I'm doing everything, but nothing well. And then there are days when I feel like Superwoman and everything works out. And I was on at council and we learned our letters after council and I made salmon for dinner. Like I have those great days, and as many great days, I'm like, ooh, we're going to McDonald's tonight, you know? And it's just I have to give myself grace. You know, I have an incredibly supportive husband. You know, he's all about, you know, this is an opportunity of a lifetime for you to give back to this community, to be part of building something. And we share that value. So he's 100% on board, though. He's got a new job, so he's working quite a bit. So that's why you see Mara at council meetings with me sometimes, and she's like in the background, and I'm like, I can't do this. But it's hard, it's hard. I'm tired. I'm just trying to make it through like everybody else. I will say one of the most important things in terms of being able to maintain my role on council has been how supportive my colleagues are and have been of having her around, and how supportive the city administration has been about having her be here, both when we were in chambers and then especially now during the pandemic with childcare being open and shut and all these challenges. That stress of, oh, is my boss going to be freaked out or my colleagues going to be irritated? They have really assured me that it's just never a problem. And I think they deserve credit for that. They really do, because it could have gone a different way. They could have rolled their eyes when I'm like, oh, my kid's here, sorry, she's screaming, and they really don't. I mean, I don't know what they're doing internally, but externally, they're like, cool, we're right there with you. How can I help you? And I think they deserve credit for that, just as a mom, to have them be part of my village. And, not all the time. It's not like they're coming over on the weekends, but on a Tuesday when I need help, or when I just have to accept the fact that my toddler is going to be part of city council with me on Tuesday, nobody bats an eye. And in fact, Kathy texts me after and says, Mara looks so cute. Her hair's so long, so that helps a lot, at least taking care of some of the guilt,
Yeah. I mean, I think that's one of the failures of our country is childcare and daycare, and being able to offer care services in the workplace. It's like so many things in our country. It's like, okay, if you want to go to college, it's survival of the fittest, right? Mm-hmm. You figure it out. And if you get those degrees, you're awesome. Like, you did it, as opposed to let's make sure everybody gets it, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same with childcare. I mean, I can't tell you, I've had my kids have sat in the corner during classes while I've taught, because
I've seen them at city council when we were in person.
I've brought them to city council because the handoff, between, work schedules, like, well, you just got to come with me because I got to be there.
Yep.
And you just, as a parent, you just have to do that. And it's just interesting how priorities and values change so much when you have children. And it's why, what I mean by so difficult of the balance is that without kids, at least for me, I'll speak for me only, you care so much about the world out there, right? Like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to change this, I'm going to change that. And then when you have kids, you're like, this is the only world that matters, because this is the most important thing that I can actually have a tangible impact on.
Yeah.
And so you kind of flip and you're like, this is what I do. And then to be able to still have a significant presence out there, that's difficult, right? That's a challenge, when you've got to prepare lunches in the morning, you've got to change diapers, or you've got to manage the sleep schedules and all of these things that a lot of people don't understand. Like this, you have to fit this in on top of all the other professional stuff you have to do.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a challenge, but at the same time, like when you see your child looking at you, like there's no greater high than that. I mean, there's no byline, there's no, oh, I won re-election. Like nothing is more important than like, this kid loves me and is wholly dependent on me.
I know. And then when you see them, like put into practice lessons that you try to impart to them about like Mara's in preschool, right? So these aren't like big deal things, but just seeing her ask someone who falls, hey, are you okay? In her little toddler voice, so not a big deal, right? It's just but to me, I'm like, wow, that's a thing I want for her. That's what I'm trying to teach her. It's like caring for folks. And that's part of what I try to tell her. She always says like, Mommy, what do you do at work? I'm like, let me tell you what I do at work. And so and that, like you said, there's nothing that could possibly compare to moments like that in terms of just feeling like your impact in the world is real and tangible and hopefully lasting. So yeah, I love it. I love being a mom. I wouldn't yeah, I wouldn't trade it for the entire world. You know, my daughter is everything, and she's everything to my husband and I. And, you know, she's kind of a celeb now because she's always on
Right.
city council with her hair going everywhere, you know?
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I got some good photos of her at a recent press conference that I covered, and she was there. For sure. It's, you know, that year when they start to read, I mean, it's phenomenal because they go from like being able to sight read or see a word and memorize to actually reading it. And you're just like, this is unreal.
That's going to be crazy.
You know, I want to talk to you. So we're talking about family. I want to talk to you a little bit about one of your Instagram posts last year and some of the things you've shared. And I just wanted to see if we could talk a little bit, because I really want to talk. You know, one of the goals of this is Meagan Harmon, the entire person, not just the Coastal Commission member. You know, but you had shared some information about some personal things as it relates to your family, and I'm just wondering if you could just talk a little bit about that, because I think that a lot of other people have experienced similar circumstances. And if you could just talk a little bit about how you dealt with that and what it meant to you. And, you know, you're going to be an inspiration role model to other people who've been in similar circumstances. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, thank you. Well, this year has been, for so many reasons, for so many of us, just so challenging. And for my family, over the last year, I have been dealing with recurrent miscarriage, which is just loss after loss after loss of pregnancies, of babies. To me, you know, that's how I saw it, and continue to see it. And my first loss this year was really towards the beginning of COVID, and it was horrific for me personally, just emotionally, hormonally. You know, I left the hospital having gone into induced labor, you know, having the hormone crashes of you know, having birthed a baby, but with no baby. And simultaneously living sort of a more public life, I was really struggling. I was, I think fair to say, in a pretty dark place emotionally. And one of the struggles for me was like how and whether I should talk about this. And I think what it really came down to is sort of living in this duality of, on the one hand, feeling like, oh my God, I don't want anyone to know what has happened to me, because this grief is like so deep, and it's also tied up in all of this shame and this feeling of being a failure, and like, you know, will people see me as a failure? Does my family see me as a failure? And so there was that, and then there was this other piece of me at the same time that was like, I can't go on. Like, I just want to scream about this. You know, I remember sitting at city council meetings, you know, a week, or maybe it was 10 days after the first loss. And I just was like, how can I get through this without turning on my camera and just like freaking out about, like, how do these people not know what's going on? And how can I continue without people knowing? And so like having these sort of dueling sensations was really super tough for me. And I think part of it is I haven't been in public life very long, so I really didn't know how to navigate crisis, personal crisis in that way. And then I remember I think it was a Thursday morning, randomly I woke up to, it's so funny because she's our neighbor, this article written by the Duchess of Sussex, and to read her words, I mean, it was as if someone had put my pain onto a page. And I remember just crying as I read it. It just hit me. And it's not like magically I felt less lonely, or magically I felt okay. It was like all of a sudden there was someone standing in that space with me. And it was this powerful woman that I'll probably never meet, you know, who had a lot to lose by being open about this shame and this grief and this just horrible emptiness. And to feel her standing with me, this person that I don't know at all. And, you know, that was a real turning point for me in terms of the decision to say, I need to be open about my experience. If only for the minuscule chance that there will be another woman sitting in her office thinking like, how, please God, no one find out about this, and how can I go on without everyone knowing about this pain, and so I wrote an Instagram post, and it was, to this day, it's, I think, one of the most vulnerable, scary things that I've ever done. I pressed post and was like, I turned my phone off because I just couldn't. I was terrified. I was terrified about the reaction. I was terrified. What if I'm not ready for people to know this about my life? But it was incredibly cathartic for me. And I felt like a weight was lifted in terms of this part of my life that was so big and so overwhelming, but that no one could see. And I'm so open in so many other ways that it felt like this big secret I was carrying. And I got, incredible feedback, like messages, calls, direct messages from strangers, from people I know very, very well, but didn't know they'd ever had a loss. That was remarkable. Just the number of women who reached out and said, thank you for being in this space with me, exactly the way I had felt, was, the most powerful thing, probably in my adult life, certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, thank you for sharing that. It's amazing because, in the council, and, you talk about the duality of it, just, you never really skipped a beat, at least outwardly. It looked as though you were the same Meagan Harmon that you had always been. And then to learn about these things later, I think it's a good reminder to everyone who judges people for the wrong reasons. Obviously, you're in politics and you asked to be in the spotlight. So yeah, your votes, people have the right to say whatever they want to say, but we also need to be careful not to attach like personality traits that are such that we want to villainize people, because everyone's a person. Everyone is dealing with something that we may or may not know of. And everybody's trying to do the best they can to be the most influential or the most impactful that they can. And on the council, and I'll just talk for a little bit about this for people who, don't know who Meagan Harmon is and haven't seen the council. It's like, as a reporter, it's just phenomenal to watch you, because I've covered elected officials over the years. And, this isn't like an endorsement. I'm not compromising my objectivity.
I was going to say, can I put this on my website?
Josh Molina says she's phenomenal. I'm just talking about the facts here. These are complex issues that you talk about on the council. And it requires planning, it requires preparation. And then by the time you go out there to talk about it in public, you have to have an articulate perspective. At the same time, you have to hear from your colleagues and the public, and you've got to be able to adjust in the moment and be able to give that out to the world in a way that makes sense, that's clear. So for reporters who are listening, it's just like gold, right? When somebody's able to articulate a clear perspective and you're like, wow, this is a great quote. I understand this. This makes sense to me. And so when we talked earlier about being driven, what I see is preparation, right? Whether somebody agrees with you or not on grocery store pay or, whatever it is, PLA or whatever, it's like, you can't accuse Meagan Harmon of not knowing the issues. You can't accuse her of not being prepared. You can't accuse her of not taking it seriously enough to try to understand where she's going to vote. And, we would love that with all our elected officials. I could say this, you don't have to, these are your colleagues. But it just depends. Some days it's high, some days it's low, depends on the person, but you're pretty consistently high functioning in that role. And it's pretty amazing to watch. And that's why there's so much buzz around you, because you give people stuff to talk about, right? If you were there and you were quiet, people would be like, well, she's
sometimes to my detriment.
She's still coming into her own, right? Yeah, she's still finding her voice, but that's not you. You found your voice a long time ago. And if you didn't found it, you're finding it on a weekly basis in front of everyone. So I will say that in terms of your public and the way you deal with it, it's just been it's just very impressive to watch, weekly,
Thank you.
deal with these issues.
I really appreciate that. And I also, as you were talking, I was kind of thinking through my like knee-jerk reaction to the word ambitious. And actually, as you were saying that, it occurred to me that and this has happened, I think from time to time, when people couple like ambitious and hardworking, the ambitious piece doesn't sort of ring the same way to me, because I feel like there's some recognition that it's like, I really put in a lot of effort here, so I really appreciate that. I mean, I think that's just always been, for me, I hate walking into a room without having done my homework. It's like that dream of being like in high school without your clothes on or whatever that, or that kind of thing, or being
you're
on
late
stage,
for class, or you're falling,
miss your test. Like I hate that feeling. And so I will do anything to avoid it. And usually that just means a lot of prep work. And I love it. I like I'm a details person. So I love it. I love having all my questions answered before I go in. And I think it makes me better. I think it puts me in a position to make better decisions. I think they're better. I think, like you said, whether you like them or don't like them, I really do try to think through what I'm doing. And I hope that gives people at least some comfort that I'm not just like randomly throwing darts.
Exactly. Or in some cases, not throwing any darts at all. It's there. So let me ask you a little about your colleagues. Obviously, you've since been very embraced by the Democratic Party. You've won their endorsement. Mayor Cathy Murillo is running for re-election. And there are some people who, feel as though she hasn't been the best mayor. Other people say, let's not get caught up on personality. She votes very consistently with the values of the people of Santa Barbara, so she deserves to be re-elected. Can you talk about your thoughts on the performance of the mayor? And, you work with her often, and how is she doing?
I do, yeah. And I'm supporting Cathy in her bid for re-election. And I think I understand the criticisms. I mean, I think, like you said earlier, we put ourselves out there, right? And it is absolutely fair to say, I don't like the way this person does this, or I don't like the way this person does this. For me, Cathy has been a huge supporter of mine, a huge support for me. She does vote the values of her neighbors, and that matters a lot to me. It matters a lot. And she has Santa Barbara heart, lover, hater. That woman has got the Santa Barbara charm, I mean, you see her when she's out knocking on doors. She will make friends with every single neighbor, whether you're on the Riviera, whether you're on the East Side. I mean, she knows how to connect with people. The pandemic's been hard. The virtual world has been tough. I don't think it does any of us any favors. It's super difficult to connect over Zoom. I find it really hard. You can't really read people in the same way. You can't. So we're adjusting. And I think that has been an adjustment. And I think we will all, myself included, look back on our performance over the last year and say, hey, if we had had time to really study how to do this well, if we knew what was coming, maybe we would do some things differently. I'm sure Cathy would say that too. But she has a heart for this city. And that's what matters the most to me. And she loves it. She loves, and I want to be surrounded by people who love Santa Barbara as much as I do, and who want to make it a better place for everyone who lives here. And that is, I think, at her core, who Cathy is.
Yeah, I'm not going to go through each member of the council and ask you what you think of them, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about one. Councilwoman Kristen Sneddon. There's obviously been lots of behind the scenes insider stuff about those two don't get along as well as Cathy and Meagan do. Is there any truth to any of that? Is that in the past? I don't know why you would not get along, because from an outsider's perspective, you're both great. I mean, Kristen Sneddon, I would say many of the same things about her that I said about you. Just really valuable to that council, really important.
Yeah.
But there's some perception that there's some rivalry there. Can you just clear the air and talk about
everybody
that?
loves the cat fight, okay? Everyone
Okay.
loves it. So I think there's like some energy in that story because it's kind of fun. And look, I believe strongly in the value that Kristen brings to Santa Barbara City Council. You know, are we the best of friends? You know, we haven't seen each other in almost a year because we've been virtual. So that part's hard. You know, I feel that way about all of my colleagues. We don't have the same, you know, run into them in the hallway, say, oh, how are you doing this week? I miss that. I really miss that. And you lose something when you don't have that personal interaction. It becomes much more sort of distant, and everything we do is mediated through technology. And I miss that connection with all my colleagues. But with Kristen, I have a deep respect for her. We don't always agree on policy issues. I think you can just watch the council, and when we don't agree passionately. But I need her perspective. I need to hear that. And she brings something, particularly in areas of sustainability and environmentalism and expertise that I don't have. I rely on her. And I would like to think, and I believe she'd say the same thing about me. We're up there with the same goal, and that's to serve our neighbors, to make their lives better. We're not going to agree 100% of the time. There's not going to be anyone that I'm going to agree with 100% of the time. And I would expect nothing less from her than to be up there fighting it out when we disagree. I love that about her. I think like that's, for me, one of my favorite meetings are when we're up there going, well, what about this? What about this? You know, not everyone loves that. I find a lot of energy in that debate. That's how I think our neighbors can be assured they're getting to a good result, because we're up there really trying to think through ideas. That's how I see it. And I think that's how she sees it too. She makes me better, 100%.
Okay. Good. And let's go through just a few issues before we wrap up. I think, you know, we've had a lot of fun talking about a lot of stuff, but let's talk about like downtown. You're the downtown Santa Barbara City Councilwoman. That is your district. State Street has been like the story of the city in many ways for the past year during the pandemic. We've dealt with the declining retail, vacant storefronts even before the pandemic. Pandemic happens, and now we've got blocks that seem to be kind of successful. The 500 block with the restaurants and the outdoor dining. And we got some blocks upper that don't have as many restaurants, that haven't been as successful. You're, for better or worse, I mean, you're the downtown council member, and people are going to look back at this time and they're going to be like, you know, Meagan Harmon, it was her district. So can you talk about the state of State Street? Are you happy with where we're at, and what are your goals for how to improve it?
Yeah, well, I love this moment. I mean, I guess I should start by saying downtown is my number one priority. All this other stuff, you know, I love it. I'm super pumped about it. I think it's going to be really good for our city. But the most important thing to me, and I think the most important thing we can do as a city right now, is to harness the power of this transformational moment for our downtown. I mean, that sounds so big. I know that sounds kind of like very woo-woo, but I really feel that way about downtown. You can't help but walk down, and you know, there are issues, right? It doesn't look very Santa Barbara. There's still circulation challenges. We've got to figure out, you know, what to do about public space versus private. I mean, there are a lot of big questions to be answered, but I feel, I talk to folks, they've never felt the energy, that sort of kinetic potential that exists in our downtown the way it exists in this moment. So I love it. I mean, it's like, there's nothing, I think, more transformative that I will do on the Santa Barbara City Council than to be part of moving this conversation about the future of State Street forward. So that is my number one priority and will always be. So what do I want to see? I mean, you know, it's not my vision alone that needs to be realized. We need to have a community vision. That's what I want to see, the building of a community vision and the execution of that vision to support our local business, to support the engine of our local economy, and to bring life to our downtown. I mean, love it or hate it, there's life downtown now. And we got to fix it. Again, I'm not saying, believe me, I know, I hear from folks, they don't there are a couple of parklets they're not fans of, and I hear that, but there's energy there. And I think, we can give each other some grace and move forward, harnessing that energy. And I think we're all on speaking of Kristen, I know she and I share that passion for this issue, and are both super excited about this State Street subcommittee that's going to be forming. It's going to be a diverse, wide sort of cross section of the community, and this can be a generational transformation. And that's how I'm seeing it. And I'm going to shoot for the moon on this. Like, I'm not going small, because I don't know that we'll have a chance like this. Certainly not in the 5 years that I have left on council. Knock on wood, if I'm lucky enough to be elected.
Yeah, and what about housing and the height of housing? Do you 60 feet? I mean, should we have some tall buildings on State Street? Obviously, this is a touchy issue because there's a whole community of environmental preservationists who've worked very hard to preserve Santa Barbara's height limits, and to them, it is the most important thing that they care about. And so when they hear the council talking about housing downtown and increasing height limits, they fight for this. It's worth fighting for. How high should Santa Barbara go to accommodate housing downtown?
I don't know, is the honest answer. I am not really passionate about 45 feet is it. I've acknowledged that publicly from the diet. I think if we want to achieve housing downtown, there's going to have to be some flexibility somewhere. Now, I don't at all mean to imply that I want to see a skyscraper in our downtown. I used to live in New York. I chose to live in Santa Barbara because I love the character of this community. I chose to live here. It's funny that a lot of people sort of give me grief about that. I'm so new here. And I'm like, well, look, what's cool, what should give you some hope about how much I love this community is that of all the places I've lived, I chose Santa Barbara. I wasn't lucky enough to be born here. I wasn't lucky enough to move here in high school. I chose this place because I love it. And this is my home, and I don't want to see it change either. I want to see us evolve because cities have to evolve. You evolve or die, I guess they say. We got to move into the future. We've got to, work on putting together a city that's more just, that's more equitable, that houses the people that are already here. But no, I don't want to see skyscrapers. And to your specific question, I don't know, what does 60 feet look like downtown versus 45? I can't say that I really sort of have that in my head to where I can give you a clear answer, but am I inclined toward more flexibility? Certainly.
Yeah. Okay. And you mentioned more social and sort of just and place for everybody to live. I want to talk to you a little bit about equity and diversity. And we had the Black Lives Matter moment last year, and hopefully it's not just a moment. It's going to continue to be influential, or it's just rooted in our society. And it's not just a high point; it's consistent in everything we do. But Kathy Murillo, she got some pushback there, but it led to the Community Formation Commission, and there's a lot of progress there. We have had changes at the police department, and so we've seen some of those things. So that's all great, and we're going in that direction. But I want to sort of ask you, you're young, you're a woman, and you're millennial, and you're closer to this generation that is growing up with, less biases, less feelings of intolerance that, the older generation, it was a different time. So can you talk a little bit about sort of your value set when it comes to equity and diversity? One of the stories that I want to write, is, we've got district elections and we have diversity on the council, and we need more diversity on the council. We look at the boards and the commissions, ABR, HLC, Planning Commission, not much diversity there. And I have no problem with white older men being involved.
Neither do they.
Awesome. Okay. But, we need lots of different types of people. How do you approach this, and how do you make it a part of your fabric and not just responsive to it when somebody calls in public comment and forces you to be accountable to it. So can you talk about how you approach this issue?
I really appreciate that question. There's a couple of things that specific to counsel that I've tried to do and that I've tried to do from the beginning. And I also want to acknowledge part of this, and maybe this is sort of generational, is that I make mistakes. And I am so grateful to the people who have called me out and said, hey, this wasn't cool. The way that you framed this was harmful to me. And I think, my job, especially as a white woman, is to really hear that and take that on and do better. And so to not be afraid of those moments and to try to do that work, I think is central to me actually centering equity in a meaningful way. I think it's one thing to be like, I believe in equity, and it's another to be afraid to confront your own prejudices or your own mistakes. And I make them. And I need to constantly be assessing my own thoughts, my own actions to make sure that they align with my values. And I think, as a person with privilege, that's one of the most important things that I can do, and try to do that both obviously in my personal life and especially here on council. But for me, one of the things that I'd like to see move forward this year, and I do with every agenda report that I read, at the end of the agenda reports, it says environmental impact, fiscal impact. And I would really like to add a section to every agenda report that says social equity analysis or equity impact. Not so much because that will give us the answer, right? You don't get the answer from reading a report. Is this just? Is this equitable? But as a reminder that the decisions that we make, every single one of them implicate justice for our neighbors. Like, you cannot take a specific vote on a housing development or more housing and separate it from equity. You cannot separate a vote on, moving forward environmental protection from justice and equity from our neighbors. And so to me, one of my goals, and I've tried to do it, I'll continue to focus on it, and I would like to see it formally become part of our agenda reports, is to remind ourselves every single decision we make needs to center our commitment to equity for our neighbors. And to not just silo ourselves, like you said, if it's, we're looking at the Community Formation Commission, so we're going to center equity here, but then we're going to take a vote on, something else, but
we're going to make appointments to the boards and commissions that don't reflect equity.
That commitment. Yeah. So that's something I'm looking to do this year. And, again, is it going to solve the world's problems? No, but I think there are ways that we can structure city government so that equity becomes a key sort of component of the conversation rather than an afterthought. And it's little things like that add up. And I appreciate the point about the boards and commissions as well. That's another of my goals this year, is to be very active in recruitment. I post a lot on social media, and one of the things that I want to do is really push opportunity and why we should be interested and what these boards can do and how they sort of relate to the decisions that get made about the city. And they're super powerful, actually, hugely powerful. Yeah. And I think it is a failure of those of us in sort of politically prominent positions like city council positions that we don't go out and recruit folks. Yeah. That we don't go out and say, hey, here's a chance to make a difference in this way. You can actually represent your neighbors in a really tangible way. And so I think there's a move on our council to really do that. I know a lot of us are feeling that way, and a lot of us are really focused on that. So
yeah, it's really valuable too. Traditionally, and I guess traditionally, we want to some ways break away from traditionally, but I don't think there's anything wrong with, if you serve on the commission, one of these commissions, like Eric Friedman or something, Harbor Commission, and then you get elected. It's just more knowledge you have,
Heck yeah.
Vote, so
absolutely. If I had been on a commission, it would have served me so much better, honestly. At least I would have understood what I was getting into,
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you for the really cool conversation, and I really appreciate your ability to be vulnerable and talk about issues that you feel may not that are personal, but have an impact on the public. And I appreciate you doing that. And of course, I always love talking to you because you're just fun to talk to, and you have so much to say, and you're so prepared. And I really appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation with you.
Thank you. And thank you for giving me space for particularly talking about, my family. And I really value that. And it means a lot to me for you to make space for that. So thank you.
And next year you're going to pass hazard pay for journalists, right? That's the next one. Just kidding.
As soon as your lobbyist calls me. Just kidding.
That's
that
kidding.
was a joke.
See, we can have fun here, right? All right.
I love it. Thanks, Josh.
Thanks.
I appreciate it.
Take care.